Hello.
Hey Roberto, how are you?
Hey, Peter. Great to see you today.
Likewise.
So, finally, we have been planning this live for a few weeks,
hmm
actually, and I'm super excited. And by the way, I see that we already have almost 40 people connected. So, hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much for connecting here today. And also, thank you for your time, for investing mm, 1 hour or half an hour of your time in listening to a conversation. It's also a big responsibility, at least for us, to be worth of this investment. And this is also what excites me, which is seeing that people are interested in what we are going to talk. And at least for me, it will be a pleasure to discuss with you today, Peter. And first of all, before we jump in, I would like you to introduce you just in one minute, and then of course let you introduce yourself. And what I what it was really surprised about you when we met for the first time, because we met in a community of creator first, and then we connected in one-on-one, and we had a first conversation, and I was super intrigued by your creativity, and at the same time the how you were very eager to suggest and to share ideas. And what I saw from the first moment was like your energy and wanting to help people and to bring the best out of everyone. And this is also perhaps why you are a coach. So now, before I explain too much, I would prefer to introduce yourself for people who don't know you and what they want to know about you.
Well, great, and thanks again for doing this. This is my first. I know you're very experienced. This will be a lot of fun. Yeah, my name is Peter Sorgenfrei. I'm Danish. I reside in Copenhagen, Denmark, but I've spent most of my career in the United States, the UK, France, and Austria. I've built 7 companies. Some of them were successful, some of them not so much. And I now spend my time coaching founders and CEOs through both the ups and downs of the personal and professional challenges that they may face.
Wow, 7 companies.
I know. I'm an old man, as evidenced by the great beard, right?
And now that you mention this, and I'm sure that in these 7 companies, you had a lot of experience, like perhaps many roller coasters, many learnings, and also this is what I see from what you share. You share a lot of your learnings, and I'm curious to hear, how did you decide to be a coach?
Well, it's a sad story and it's a positive story because essentially I was running my last company. I was the CEO of a startup with autonomous or self-driving vehicles, and I had 70 employees in 5 countries. And then I got sick and couldn't work for a period of time, and eventually got fired by my board because of a buyer was no longer going to buy the company. Either way, and then I had to figure out what to do next. And I'm not really good at being an employee, so I thought maybe I'll just start another company because that's kind of what I know how to do. And then I realized that I'd missed having somebody like what I do today around as I was building all these companies. I had missed having somebody who was completely independent of a board or an investor or my partner at home or a friend or my co-founder, but at the same time, somebody who had gone through similar experiences. So it was a little bit more than a regular coach, if you will, who hadn't necessarily built companies, or a psychologist or somebody else that you might talk to. So I was trying to merge those things. And I then wrote 40 founders, CEOs around the world that did not know me and described this idea. I wasn't pitching them.
Mm.
And a really interesting thing happened, because we all know when you write somebody cold, most of the time it's crickets. But a lot of them got back to me and said, that sounds amazing. When do we get started? How much is it? How does it work? And I wasn't really selling anything. And so a few months later, I got a note from somebody in the United States who's a fairly famous founder. And he said, I heard you're doing something. I'd like you to come over and spend some time with me. I'm going through some stuff. And so I went over there and he became my first client. And now, thankfully, I have clients in 7 different countries and get to work with amazing people every single day.
Yeah, and what I hear from you is that you enjoy absolutely what you do. And when you talk about I I I work with amazing people, and this is also one of the beauty probably of coaching, is that you get to know people and you see all the brilliance, all the things that people can do, and you're also part of this, and you have an impact, and this is something beautiful,
Mhm.
because at the same time you're completely autonomous, and you also, I believe, you also choose your customers and vice versa. It's not like you have to choose your coachee and the coachee has to choose the coach. It's a deeper relationship.
It is indeed. And like I met you, I get to meet really interesting people who contribute tremendous insight and value to my life as well, right? So I just had a session earlier today with a client which is in a quite difficult position. But even so, out of that came an energy or some ideas that then gets me to think differently about how I apply myself in my work life. Um, so it's the most rewarding job I've ever had, honestly. It doesn't feel like a job. I'm very thankful that I get to do this every day.
Mm. And this reminds me of something that you discussed earlier in past weeks, which was the idea of the alignment.
Hmm.
Can you talk a bit more about this? What's for you?
Well, I think a lot of people talk about work-life balance. And to me, it's more like work-life integration. We
Mm,
live in a world now where we might go to an office, but during that day, we deal with some personal stuff. I know, unfortunately, that your little ones have been sick, right? So there's all these things coming at us while we at the same time have to take care of our professional duties and our personal duties. So the thing I work with clients on is to kind of accept that
mm,
as fact, instead of having it be a struggle between the two things, the personal and the professional life, and then start seeing how we can be aligned with the things that we want to do. So when we're at home or when we're in our personal space, even though we're at the office, we're doing our personal thing, right? Calling home, checking on the kids if that's the thing, or arranging a summer vacation for a few minutes while we're still in the middle of something else. And then when we're in our professional sphere, we're professionals. So we try to be present with where we are, and be true to who we are in that moment. And that's something a lot of people want to do, but have a hard time figuring out how to do. And so that's what I work with my clients to get there.
mm. And when you said work-life integration, I could not have said it better. And actually, this is something that I also believe it. And more, for example, now what we're doing, is it work? Is it personal? Uh, there are the boundaries are not 100%. Of course, we have for example, in my case, I have my job and I do in the time, but at the same time, when I'm out, keep thinking of things, and what we do outside of your job sometimes is connected inside and vice versa. So, and I was once thinking about, oh, we have to have a straight line and we don't have to move here and there. And at the same time, when you accept that it's perfectly fine, for example, to work on a weekend, if you have to do it, of course, if it's every single weekend and you don't spend time with your family, maybe that's a problem. And maybe you are trying to do too much, or maybe you're controlling too much and you don't let other people do their work.
Exactly.
But at the same time, it's perfectly fine if sometime you have to do it, because then you know that when it's the moment, as you said, you are doing the work and there's something happens, you can take this time because you are responsible. And what you talk about also speaks about autonomy and being responsible for our work and having the responsibility also of knowing what we have to do, and the job and the work is still there when you go back. So you know that you take some time, but then of course you still have to do it once it's the moment. So it's
Yeah,
more.
and I think that's what a lot of people tend to forget, whether they're in a traditional employment job situation, whether they're in a startup, or whether they're the founder or the CEO. The folks that I work mostly with is, work and the things we have to do professionally will always be there, to your point. It can always grow. We can always do more. So it's about being conscious. I'm not saying do less necessarily. It's about being conscious of saying, I make a choice here. Am I working or am I not working? And if I'm working, I'm working, and then try to be focused on that. But if I'm not working, then be present and with your family. And I think for many in the startup community, certainly, we're constantly thinking about things. And also, when we come out of work. And what was the problem for me, honestly, when I was doing my thing, was my hobby was my work. I wasn't necessarily working a lot of hours. I almost never worked on the weekends, never worked late at night, just because of how I'm wired. But I was always thinking about work. I was always thinking about the new idea or the next thing, or did I remember to do this, right? So even though I was with my friends or with my family, I wasn't really there. And I think a lot of people are struggling with that one and how to get out of that, because, well, I get this on my phone, so technically speaking, we can eliminate distraction with our phones. But the biggest issue is to get control of this one. How do I manage my mind so that I can be more present with the people that I'm with at that moment?
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And what I hear is also in coaching, I guess that you have to be present with the other person. And there is a thing, for example, my training is from the coactive coaching. And we have a say that we have the level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 is our own mind. Oh, I'm thinking about this, I want to do that. And you are thinking about your own stuff and what you want to do, etc. Level 2 is the other person. And you are only focusing on the person. You are really hearing. And level 3 is the person and also the environment and your intuition, etc. And this also requires a lot of self-management because you have to be present. And if you are not 100% with your coachee, but also I think is applied with other things in a meeting or in a conversation. If you're not present with the person, now we are discussing, if we were not present with each other, there will be no connection. So
there wouldn't be, and most people sense it, right? So if I wasn't present with you, maybe not right now because we're doing LinkedIn Live, but if you and I were having a conversation, you would get the feeling that I wasn't quite there because I was thinking about what I'm going to make for dinner or something else, right?
yeah.
But that's actually not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is the feeling you have with yourself. Like, do I want to go through life being the person who cannot give my attention to somebody else because whether or not we're having spaghetti bolognese or lasagna tonight? I have a 12-year-old, right? So that's kind of the menus here. So do I want to be that person, or do I want to be the person that when Roberto is in front of me or on the phone, as would be the case mostly with you and I'm there. I'm into what he is wanting to talk about, because that actually makes me feel good. That makes me feel like this is the guy I want to be in the world. So when we kind of reframe it that way, when we think about what kind of person do I want to be, not for your sake, not for Rebecca's sake, but for my sake, it actually becomes much easier to be present with the people that you care and love about, even though that sounds funny when you say it out loud.
Yeah. It's like, which kind of person do I want to be, what I want to express.
Exactly. It's not about what you think, actually, right? Because we're so worried about, oh, what will Roberto think, or what will these guys think? We worry about a lot of other people all the time, and nobody's immune to that.
Yeah.
And that's also important because, of course, we need to be respectful and treat others kindly. But at the end of the day, it's more about who am I? What am I? And then getting a handle on that. And I think for a lot of folks that you meet in your coaching practice and that I meet, they've gotten away from that, right? They may have started being calm, collected, kind leaders of businesses, but because of the stresses of the job or because of the stresses of the startup, over time they become something else and they kind of get lost. And what people like you and me try to help them with is to get back to who they actually are and then go out into the world as that person.
Yeah. And now that you said getting lost, I'm curious. You talk a lot about having done all the mistakes. And from this
Are we
perspective,
going to talk about all my mistakes now?
yeah, I have mine also. I will share mine. And I'm super curious. What's the mistake or the learning that mm, left a mark on you and really changed something?
Oh, well, there's many. I think you can kind of divide them into sort of tactical mistakes, like
Mm.
things you can actually do on a day-to-day basis that I didn't do, and then there's sort of the more strategic or mental mistakes, right? And if we start with that, the more esoteric ones, I think I early on had the feeling that it was me against the world. I did not have community. You know, I wrote recently about Elon Musk, right? And not there's no comparison. I know that, but there are certain people who are so focused on one thing and so driven, and maybe they believe they have all the answers, and so they just do it kind of their way or the highway. And I was like that in a long period of my career because I felt like I had the answers. I felt like I could do it. I didn't build community. I didn't, I had great employees and colleagues, and everybody was really happy working with me. And we can talk about that separately. But I took the burden and I took the weight on my shoulder. And
Oh, no.
so in the last 4 years, one of the things that I've done a lot here on LinkedIn is build community, is to
Mm.
connect with people like yourself and others, because I realized at the ripe old age of 45, right? I'm turning 50 this year. Thank you very much. Um, that I needed more people in my life for my life to be richer. And that was one of the mistakes I made early on.
Mm. Yeah, and how funny, of course, in a metaphorical sense, which is also the same thing that I did, to not focus on relationship, on people, as much as I should have.
Mm,
And in my case, when you talk about this of community, I love what you said about community. It's not like only relationship, it's community. And in community, what I hear is that you learn from each other. And so it's not like a, a transaction.
mm,
It's something more. And my mistake in my case, it was like early on. Now I'm 42, but I also have my. And I did many mistakes, and the one that I remember more vividly is precisely having too much, let's say,
mm.
orientation.
Yes.
You focus too much on the task, too much on doing perfect, and then you think that everything is doing the thing perfectly.
Mm,
But at the same time, if you don't invest time in relationship, if you don't get buy-in from the people, if you don't uh, create a good environment in your team, results don't matter.
mm,
And it's much better to have 80% perfect and having cared for the people, having done it good, having shared, having asked opinion, all these things, that doing it perfectly your way, which by the way, is not necessarily
mm.
the only way. You think that you have the truth, but then maybe it's only your version. And instead focus more on the people. And of course I learned it the hard way.
Mm.
But now it's something that I'm very mindful. And what you said also about reaching out, when you said in the beginning, you reached out to these 40 CEOs and you're surprised of what happens because you reach out with something that you care about, and from a place that it's authentic to you and it's what you care,
Mm.
and people respond. And this is, wow, this is amazing.
And I think that's a key point. So when I meet a young founder, which I also do, to be a young founder is somebody in their early mid-20s building a company and it's their first company. Very often the thing we work on is around not having all the answers and being okay with that. So they portray outward, they think that the startup environment is one where they have to be, show strength and I know what I'm doing. They don't show vulnerability, they don't show insecurity because that's what our investors want, that's what my team wants. And I now, because I had the experience, I can tell them, well, actually, no, if you show insecurity and vulnerability, people will rally around you and help you build something that is better than it otherwise would be. But as a 20-something-year-old, hopefully people on this stream know, but a lot don't, or at least they don't know how to show it. And so I wish I had learned that when I was in my 20s and not when I was in my 40s.
Yeah. And I guess this is something that we have to learn from ourselves.
Yeah.
Someone can tell us, it's better to show when you're not sure. And then until you don't do it yourself and you don't bang your head on the wall, you will not.
Yeah.
It's something that, yeah, and it looks like counterintuitive. When you show that you don't know, oh, they will doubt about my skill. They will think that I'm not competent. And I also see myself in this in my early days. And at the same time, it's the opposite. Because when you say, I'm not sure about how to do this,
Mm.
of course, people know. You mentioned in the beginning that when we are not in the conversation, if you're thinking about something else, people notice. Of course, people notice when you're faking to be sure, and you can never be sure of everything. If I meet someone who's always sure of himself, always has 100% of the certainty, I don't believe him or
Mm.
her. And at the other side, if they say, I'm not sure about this, what would you do? I believe more in that person, because then when they say, I'm sure, I will believe that it's true because it's honest.
Yeah.
And and what you said also connected to something that you talk about, which was making people care.
Mm.
What is the secret for you of making people care?
Well, like, again, it goes back to being human, right? So I practice this whole human approach, which means back to our alignment that you essentially show people who you are. And that will get them closer to you, right? You can't do it inauthentically. Is that even a word? You can't do it, you can't fake it.
Yeah.
If I meet Roberto and I can feel him and I can see what he's about, and he shows me the vulnerability, for example, then I care about how we are going to do something together more than if I see somebody where I can't see the cracks in the armor, or where I can't see a little bit about his personal life, or I can't see these other things. And now we're talking in professional context, right? So that's one aspect. It sounds very simple. You just have to be you, but all of us, regardless of age, put on a certain suit or a certain armor or a certain coat when we go out in the world. But the more we can be ourselves, the more people will care. That's number one. Number two is around sense of ownership, right? So, we might talk about hiring in a minute, but one of the things that I really like to preach is to make sure that the people that you work with understand not only that they have a vital role to play, but that you give them the responsibility and to give them the things, or you together figure out what the things are that they need to work on, and that you then let them fail or succeed alongside with you in a safe environment, right? In an environment where there's psychologically safety and where they can feel that it's okay to fail. A lot of leaders say this, but they're terrible at doing it. Right? They're like, yeah, I want to provide this safe space, and we can fail. It's okay. And the first time somebody fails, they get berated in a meeting or worse, right? But if you can actually honestly say, you know what, Susan, it's okay. We're going to figure it out together. And if you can do that a couple of times, and if you can't coach Susan to figure it out on her own over time, then you have a different issue. But if you create that environment, people will really care about what you do, and will stick with you for the long haul. So I've hired north of 200 or 300 people, maybe even at this point, over the years, and it's clear when I failed, it's because I did not show my side or my personality. Number one. Number two, I jumped too fast in and course corrected something they were doing. I didn't give it enough time to kind of get underway. And so people started not really trusting what I was saying. So there was a disjoint between what I was saying and what I was doing.
Mhm.
And then eventually they either left or they were poor performers, and I got rid of them because I didn't create the environment in which they could succeed.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And actually, I this is something that remind me of an idea from an amazing book, which is Care to Dare
Mm-hmm.
from George Corizon. Maybe you read it also, which is first you have to care for the people and show that you care, and then you can dare them. And what you said is like the perfect example of you being the secure base for these people. You give them a challenge, and then if they fail, you are there and you hold them and you don't just punish whatever. And you mentioned hiring, and
Mhm.
where does this caring and daring fit into the hiring process for you?
Yeah, but I'm known for spending an inordinate amount of time on hiring. There is no more important thing in a company, right? So, I would have 4 or 5 interviews myself with people that I would hire in different circumstances. I spent a lot of time on it, even when we grew the companies to several hundred employees. And now people are being like, oh, that doesn't scale, that and the other. No, that's true, it doesn't scale, but there's nothing more important. So that's how I chose to do it. People can do it whichever way they want to. So the thing I did once we'd figure out that we were going to be working together, and people came into the business, I typically gave them 3 tasks. The first task would be something that they could do in their sleep that they'd done in their previous role, something that was super easy for them to do, right? So get started. The second task would be something that was somewhat more challenging that they hadn't done before in their role necessarily, but that I knew that they would be able to kind of stretch and get done. And the last one, and this is the kicker, was something incredibly difficult, but super important for our business that nobody knew how to do, right? I've started a lot of companies in spaces that were kind of new technology, new things. So it was really greenfield, many of the things we've done. And so I would give them something that was instrumental to our sort of taking the next step that they had never done before. And I'd say, you're here for a reason, Roberto. I hired you because you are who you are, because you're super good at what you do. This task, somebody in this business needs to solve and figure out. I think it should be you. Please go do that. And in the beginning, most people like freaked out and they're like, whoa, what is this? Is the company resting on my shoulders? And obviously it didn't, and we would show them that.
Yeah.
But then little by little, they would kind of work their way through and figure out how to do it. And as they presented it back to me or to whomever else they were working with, and people were like, yeah, that's actually a good idea, but did you think about this, or could we do it in this way? They got a real sense, again, of ownership,
Ownership. Yeah.
of contribution, of purpose. And so within the first couple of months of being in any of the companies that I had, people would be like totally in there and feel like it had been, a longer period of time because they had been so ingrained in key problem solving for the business. So that's how I did it. And when we interview, or I have done that historically, interview people who work for me, a lot of folks say the first 3 months were incredibly difficult. I mean, I would go home and not know, and this guy Peter, and how could I live up to his expectations and all that. But then after that, it was the best work environment I've ever had. You've been the best boss I've ever had because you created this space. And mind you, Roberto, I didn't get educated in this. I just did it by dumb luck, starting 20 years ago, right? So that's how I did it.
And 300 people, of also 300 interviews, 300 hires. So also what I hear is that you invest a lot in the beginning in the relationship, in making sure that the person feels that you care. It's not the same. You enter in a company and and the CEO interviews you personally. You already see that you care.
Well, my businesses weren't, Walmart or we didn't have tens of thousands of employees, right?
Yeah.
But it's not that they should feel that I care. It should that they should see and know that I care.
Yeah.
And so another thing I did, I never had salary ranges, for example. I literally told people, you tell me what you want to get paid. But before you do, there are 4 things you need to know. Number 1, if you come back with a number that's much, much higher than what I think we should pay for this role with your experience in this context, I will say, thank you very much. I will not negotiate. It was nice meeting you. Because if I start negotiating, I can say, oh, Roberto, that's 10% more than I thought. That 10%, when it's cold and winter and I'm asking you to install something in some faraway city, you're going to be like, maybe I shouldn't have taken this job. I don't want to get there, so I don't negotiate. Number 2, when you come back with your number, you need to think about what you, in the context of this job, is worth to a company of our size. So we're not, McKinsey, or we're not Sony. We're a startup. So what do you think it should be worth? And then last or second or third and fourth would be considered in the context of your home life. I don't want you to come work with me and having to explain at home that you've taken a massive pay cut for these reasons. It has to work on your home life. So it has to be able to pay your bills, those kind of things. And so when people did that and they come back to me with a number, in 80% of the cases, they were within a couple of percent of what I had thought they should be paid. And in the cases where they weren't, we would talk about it, even in the cases where I had to reject them outright. I'd say, I'm sorry, that's too high, and here's why. And good luck in your endeavors, because you will actually be happier somewhere else where they can make that compensation happen for you. And in the cases where they were way too low, I would say, actually, Roberto, you probably didn't think this through. Here are the reasons why it should be higher. So I think we should start you higher. But if they were way too low, let's say 30 or 40%, then I would also say, thank you very much, because then they hadn't done the homework and done the exercise. Which means I've spoken to an awful lot of people over the last 20 years, because to get to 300 hires, I've probably interviewed north of 5,000 people, right?
Wow. And it also speaks again of responsibility and ownership. When you are setting your own salary and you have to do this homework, it's not like, oh, yeah, they give me this, I accept, and then you start again. When you think about where hard times comes, oh, I accepted this, they forced my hand. No, no, no. You chose. So this is much different perspective.
But I'm telling you, when my last company was here in Denmark, and it was funded by a big industrial family. And so they had an HR department, and I told them two things. I told them I was going to do video interviews. They're like, we don't do video interviews. I'm like, I don't give a shit, right? I'm going to do video interviews, and I'm going to ask people to answer questions on video. Well, we haven't even invited them. I know, but I want to get a feel of who they are. I want to see that they're comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I said is, yeah, I'm not going to have salary bands. I'm going to have an idea of what the role is worth, and when they come through the door, this is how I'm going to do it. They almost lost their marbles. They're like, that can't be done. I'm like, is it illegal? No, it's not illegal. Okay, that's how I'm going to do it. And the candidates in Denmark were also quite surprised, because they'd never experienced something like that before.
Wow. And now that you mentioned this, which looked like a very different way to manage people. And before we go to the chat, because we will also check there are some other questions, which, by the way, if you have any question for Peter or for me, drop them in the chat. We will check in a few minutes. But before, I'm curious, because you have a very privileged perspective, talking to a lot of CEOs of very different companies. You had your own. What are the biggest shifts or trends that you see today in the world of work? What you see?
Oh, that's a very broad question. I think the mentality is different. I think that CEOs and founders know that in order for them to attract the best talent, they need to create different environments that even 10 years ago they thought they could create. Right? 10 years ago, it was enough to work on AI, let's say.
Yeah.
Which is the cool technology today. So if you did on that, you could attract the engineers, you could attract all this other stuff. But today, in order to attract the best performing people, you first have to convince them not to start their own thing. Because everybody wants to start their own business, right? So at the first you have to say, all right, Roberto, I know you're a brilliant engineer and you could build all sorts of stuff, but why don't you come and do it here with me, right? And number two is, then I have to create an environment in which you have that sense of ownership, have that sense of purpose and contribution, and I need to keep nurturing that. So once you're here, I think CEOs and the founders that I speak to today, they spend a lot of time with their people on a day-to-day basis, not, patting them on the back, but making sure that they create that environment so that they will do their best work, and then accept that in 2 or 3 years, Roberto, he will go do something else, because that's a more natural cycle than the cycle, I think 10, 15 years ago, even in startup land, you stayed with a startup for a longer period of time than you do today. There's a higher churn now than there was before.
Interesting. And I also see in hearing what you say, a lot of the importance in put into the relationships, into colleagues, what you talk about in the beginning, the community. I'm here 3 years. I'm thinking that, okay, I have to do and make the best of this time. I have to have a purpose for me. I have to learn. I have to be in a good relationship with everyone. And I have to see what's my contribution, because then after these 3, 4 years or whatever, I will be going to another place. So it has to be a worth investment. And when you said at the beginning, you have to convince not to do your own thing. And this is an investment. I'm going to invest X year of my life, of my professional life here. So this is a big responsibility also for the
there's
company.
much more of a give and take, and actually it also
Yeah.
comes down into, we just spoke about interviewing, right? So if somebody who's listening to this is thinking about doing something else, going to a company, the balance has changed a little bit. It used to be that the company was kind of up here and you're like, please, can I come work for you and work with you, right? But today, actually, it's much more level, where the companies have to do as well a job as convincing the person who's applying as the applicants has to make sure, is this the environment I want to be in?
Yeah.
Another trick for founder CEOs on the call is make sure you do everything you can to encourage people not to take the job. Make sure that they fully, completely understand what it is that they're getting themselves into, because then you avoid that they wake up 6 months later and they're like, wait a minute, this is not what I signed up for.
Yeah.
And so in the interview process, the companies have to do two things: give an honest, true, transparent picture of everything that's the company. Make sure that the candidate fully understands and experiences what that is, what's being communicated. Because we hear one thing, right? You say, oh yeah, we're challenged a little bit here. What the candidate says, oh, like, oh, that sounds fun, right? Well, it's not fun. It's actually a pain in the bum. And on the candidate side, it would be around saying, okay, do I really honestly see myself here? Is this the environment I can grow in? Or do I just need a job? And if you're in the do I just need a job camp, I understand that from a financial perspective, we all need to make a living. But I'd really encourage you to think twice about, if you have any doubts about joining a business, don't. Try to find a way to find a better place, because to your point, we spend 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours on this thing called work. So it better be right.
Yeah. And I also hear what you say about transparency from the person in being hired. So they say, I'm here, I'm committed, I'm not. And if I'm just looking for a job, it can be also fine. But if it's not, it's better, of course. and at the same time, the responsibility for the company to be honest and transparent from the beginning. And reminded me of an article that I read from a group, which is amazing also, with corporate rebels, which was called the Scare Them Letter. Scare them away. So you just spill all this bad stuff or the not so glamorous stuff on the table day one, and they say, okay, this is everything that you had to know. This is not going to be a walk in the park with flowers, etc. There are some good things, which of course we have, and this is also this and this and this. And especially in companies of, for example, where you mentioned not having range of salaries. This is something unexpected, and this is also a kind of transparency and a way to be honest from the
But
beginning.
think about that for a second, right, Roberto? The salary range is I understand why companies need to do that for a lot of organizational reasons. But at the end of the day, when Peter goes to work, Peter is worth something. Let's call it X. And in order for Peter's life at home to work, I live in a house. Could I live in a smaller place? Yes. Could I not have a car? Yes. All these other things. But my life is what my life is.
Yeah.
So if the number doesn't allow me to continue with that life, or a little bit better, it will seep into me. It will not be the right environment for you. And there's plenty of things you can do, especially today. You can work in all sorts of ways in all sorts of parts of the world. It's about finding the human fit and the financial fit. And I think people sell themselves short on both whenever they're in this situation. Now we're talking a lot about hiring. I don't know if this is where you wanted to go today, but it's one of my favorite topics. I think it can be done so much better than it's being done today.
And it's super interesting because you said the human and the financial, and it's important. Both are important. We don't have to say no.
It's
no.
kind of like finding your spouse, right? You're happily married, and that's because you made wise choices and you interviewed your spouse, and you guys figured out we have the same values, we have the same setup, both on the human side and also on the financial side. That's why you guys are so great together.
Absolutely, yeah. Why don't we check the chat if you have some question? I have it here. So let's see if we have some question, because we can go on for an hour talking about this. It's super interesting. Yeah, absolutely. So let's see if we have some question. Let's see. From the beginning.
I see one here from Russell that talks about, is an early founder really age-based? Some surely come to founder status late in life. Absolutely. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear on that. Actually, many people become founders late in life. I just saw a stat the other day that founders in their 40s and 50s are more likely to IPO than founders in their 20s and 30s. I'm not sure. We can look into the details, but you're absolutely right. So let me reframe it or rephrase it. Early founder to me is somebody who's never been a founder before. So maybe it's more about the first time you're building a company, regardless of your age. I do believe that a certain cockiness comes with youth. I had it. I think a lot of us can relate to doing things in our teens and our 20s that we probably wouldn't think about doing later in life. And I also believe that as we got more life experience and age, then we see the world in different ways. But thanks for that question. Maybe this clarifies it.
Yeah, good point. Let's see. Hello, hi Beatriz. Yes, Kate. Yeah, work-life integration. Absolutely. Being intentional with the time. Yeah. Okay, I have a question. Can you want to explain how you can accomplish your work 100% between exactly 9 and 5? I've seen so many of our workers open up their computer exactly at 9 and closing it down at 4:59. Okay, so I will try to answer but at the same time, I think we don't have a single answer. To me, the idea related to this is what's really important, because work. There is a nice law which is called the Parkinson law, which is work expands to fill the time allocated to this. So if we had 12 hours, we would probably work 12 hours. If we had 4 hours, we will focus on the most important thing and get it done. And it's also connect with what you said in the beginning about being present. If I know that I have to be at 4 p.m. or 5 p.m., whatever, to my daughter dance show, I will do everything to be super efficient. I will not waste 1 minute. And this drive will make that I will be super efficient that day. So it's not about, perhaps it's one side being focused, and at the same time, to me, it's like choosing what to do and what not to do, or what to delegate, or what to leave. So and this can work for most of the thing, and then of course you can have something unexpected, but most of the time you should be able to control. And this is also related to the autonomy and to responsibility and ownership. If you feel the ownership and you are the master, let's say, of your time, you will be much, much better prepared to deal with this and to work. What do you think about it?
No, I think that's absolutely true. But actually, I saw that there's a couple of more questions come in, so maybe we should make sure we cover everything else.
Absolutely.
So Timothy asks, do you have any go-to interview questions that you ask? Beyond the already mentioned, what are you looking for when you hear the answer from the candidate? Do you want to take a stab at that one, Roberto, or should I?
Oh, my question, usually I ask what excites the person the most. What was telling me about something that you really enjoy. And this is funny, because it's also a question for what we call in coaching the discovery session, which is to see the values of the person. So I ask, and I also did in my one-on-one and exit interviews, and also in the interview, what it absolutely gets you nuts and you can't stand on one side, and what excites you the most. And from this extreme, you have a lot of information. And also, I think you cannot, as you said, you cannot fake this. When you talk about something that excites you, you can see that. And you cannot prepare, because you don't need preparation. It's just who you are. So a very personal and work-related question for me will be the one.
Yeah, I typically would spend time with people in environments where they didn't think we would be interviewing. So, rather than having come to the office, I would ask them to meet me at a local park to go for a walk. I would talk about the things that we would observe, like a tree, somebody sitting on a bench, whatever it would be. But I did that to sort of tease out their imagination. Like what kind of things could they imagine if I said, so for example, some lady was sitting on a bench. I'm like, what do you think her story is? And then you start seeing how people are thinking about, well, she, this, that, and the other, right? They tell you something. So that's one thing I did. The other thing I did was I would ask questions that I thought they would never have been asked somewhere else. One of my favorites is tell me something that very few people know about you. And because that question allows you to see, okay, is Roberto going to tell me that, he eats peanut butter with his fingers out of the jaw when nobody's looking? I don't know if you do that, but as a stupid example, right? Or is he going to tell me that in the third grade, he won the medal because he built a rocket in some physics class, whatever, right? So what kind of story, what kind of vulnerability, what kind of intimacy is he willing to give me this early in our relationship? And mind you, I didn't set it up. I just asked the question. I didn't sort of preface it with saying, I really want something juicy about how you eat your peanut butter. No, I just, it kind of gives you a sense of how comfortable is somebody with me telling me that. And I would typically do it in the later stage of the interview process. And then to your point, that's a really good one, Roberto. Like, what pisses you off? Like, what am I going to do as your boss, potentially, that will make you so enraged and so frustrated? And the standard answer is be disrespectful of my time or something like that. Fine, that's fair. But you can actually get to more interesting questions, because people could say, if you're late to meetings with me, I find that super disrespectful. And then I'll say, well, why is that? Where does that come from? This upsetness about being late to meetings. Well, because I had, and then they tell me some personal story about something happening in their life. So you can really gauge a lot of things by asking them those kind of questions.
Yeah.
Should we jump to another one?
Sure. Okay, the early founder, go to interview. Kate says, love the advice of not joining. We blame the company and it's good to bring ourselves into the equation. Question, how do we stop the blame game and work together to win? Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it starts with honesty and transparency, right? If you have a sense that a company you're interviewing with is not really telling you what's going on, if it's a little too rosy, if it's a little too easy, then I would start challenging that as a candidate. But having the confidence to do that when you're in that situation can be difficult, right? But literally, I would say something along the lines of saying, okay, you've told me all this stuff, but it can't be that good. Well, there has to be, where does the company fail?
Yeah.
Or where does this department not work out? Or, kind of interrogate them a little bit back. Because you show them by doing that A, you're really interested in getting to the heart of what it means to be a colleague with the team or with the company. But the other thing is you're showing them that you care. And if they cannot answer those questions, if they give you superficial answers to those, they will do that continuously. And over time, you will not have trust and transparency with them. And therefore, you should not go work there.
Yeah. And when you talk about this vulnerability, it's something similar to what we discussed in the beginning about the people not having all the answers. No company have all the answer, and no company is perfect. And this is something that also when you work in some place, you always think that the grass is greener everywhere else. But then, because you only see the outside, and we compare in company, in life, in everything, we compare our inside and ourselves with the other people, other company outside. But then when you are in, you say, oh, okay, this is the same. We have also struggle, we have challenges. So, and when you see someone who shares this, you see, oh, they are different. And then you care more. And then exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
You want to be with people who get you, right?
Yeah.
You want to be, so again, we can't all sort of walk around and think that everything the company cares about is us. And that's not what I'm advocating. But we should still be in environments where they kind of understand. So I think it was Kate or somebody who, on the chat that brought this up, right?
Yeah.
They have to get you. Like, how can I get the best out of Roberto while giving him the best experience? It's kind of a two-edged thing. And
Yeah.
if they don't understand who Roberto is, how can they actually provide an environment in which you can succeed? Right?
Yeah.
The days are gone. So the companies we're talking about is obviously not necessarily manufacturing on a factory line. We're talking about knowledge workers and those kind of things primarily. But if I know what I need to do to get most value for my money, essentially, out of Roberto, that's a win-win because he's going to enjoy working there. He's going to do his best work. That's good for him. And the company is going to benefit. So if the
Absolutely.
company doesn't get you and doesn't want to understand you, why should you not take your talent somewhere else, like LeBron James said when he went to Miami from Cleveland, if there's any
Yeah.
basketball fans?
Yeah. And when they get you, then you also have the responsibility of giving back and doing your best. So you cannot hide and say, "Oh no, they don't get me." No, 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 no. It's like I cannot blame them. It's on me now to do my best, to give my 100% and to choose how to do that. So there's no excuse. Sometimes, oh no, it's the company, it's everything. No, 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 no. When you see this transparency, then you have also to be in accordance to that. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. Let's see if you have some more question. One. Okay, I think not. I have one more question for you, Peter, before we wrap up. And I'm
Yep.
super curious also. What's the project now, or what's the thing that excites you the most?
A lot of things excite me.
Yeah, okay, so
But
difficult
now you're
question.
giving me the interview question, aren't you? So I'd be happy to come work for you any day. If this is an interview, you've shown me who you are, and I'd love to work on the Roberto Ferraro enterprises.
Yeah, same here.
So what excites me? I'm in the enviable position to have found my true calling. Working as a coach with founders and CEOs. So to me, it's exciting to do more of that. So I'm doing a couple of things now that are going to be new. I'm doing something called a CEO Circle, which is like a group coaching program for founders and CEOs over an 8-week period where we get together and do it in a group rather than my one-on-one sessions. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then
A community again. So what do
again, a
we?
community, right?
Yeah.
I do these lunches and dinners sometimes, and I do these virtual lunches too. And whenever I bring together a group of like minds, similar to this chat, hopefully, a
Yeah.
lot of people walk away with something that they can use from one of the participants, or sometimes from me, or whatever it is. So I want to do more of that. So I'm doing
Wow.
the CEO Circle, and then I'm launching a podcast with founders, similar format to this. Where we talk about all the nitty gritty stuff and all the failings that we go through. And I'm trying to give an audience to people who don't necessarily have an audience, right? So not the most popular founders and CEOs you can find, but people who are doing tremendous work that I think the world could learn from. So those are two things that excite me. What about you?
Yeah, again, as you said, many, many, many things. At this moment, what I would say that excites me the most, and also I want to be very focused, is the coaching.
Mhm.
And not only because it's something that helps me to be a better person, because first of all, we also always say that to be a coach and to take the coachee to a place, we have to have been there first. So it requires a lot of self management and knowing ourselves and accepting many things. And so the work that you have to do on yourself to be a coach is amazing. And at the same time, it's wonderful. Also, as you said, to see amazing people and to see how with your presence and with questions and with being there for them, they can make transformation. They can show and be sure also of who they want to be. And again, connects with something that we said in the beginning, who I want to be, what I want to express. We don't ask this question often. And it's a pity because we should have, I'm convinced that we should have always a coach during our whole life. And sometimes ago, it was seen like, oh, you need a coach because you have something to be fixed. This
Yeah,
was,
it's not about fixing.
Yeah,
Honestly,
exactly.
well, in some cases it's about fixing if they've gotten to a point where something is broken, but in most cases it's about allowing them to trust the answers that they have within. Right?
Exactly.
It's about getting to a point where you can honestly be who you are and be the best at that. Um, I ask this question, sometimes, when you go to like a cocktail party or dinner or somebody and somebody says, "So what do you do?" Right? And everybody goes, "Well, I do this," and they talk about work. So what I do is I say, "Well, I actually I'm writing a novel, or I paint, or I do these other things." And people are like, "Well, wait a minute, I thought you were going to tell me you're an accountant, right?" Um, but then I asked them back. I was like, "All right, so," and I hear what they do, and then I said, "But who are you?" Most people, when you ask them that question, get a little bit uncomfortable. So I'm that annoying guy at the cocktail party that nobody wants to talk to, right? But who are you? Think about that, and I would encourage the people who are on this to actually, who am I truly in my personal and my professional life? And is that the person that I want to be? And if it's not the person I want to be, how do I get to be that one person? And it's
Mm.
not about, I need to run more or I need to eat healthier or, from a values perspective, am I living my values? Am I being true to who I am? And if that's not the case, how do I get there? Because a life where you're not in alignment, back to our first topic, with what's inside, is not really a life. There's somebody else who jumped on with a question. Udo asks about, if you basically do what I said I do, which is encourage people not to take the job, and then you end up losing a great candidate. Have I ever experienced that? Yes, I've experienced it a few times, or many times even, where somebody who on paper was a really good candidate and personality-wise was really good and everything seemed to fit, but they chose not to join us because they didn't feel that it was the right fit for them, based on all the stuff that I told them.
Mm.
So they went somewhere else, even if I was ready to hire them. The thing is, if they have that feeling sitting in that room that day at the end of the sixth or seventh interview or going in the park or whatever we were doing, then they shouldn't join anyway.
Yeah.
The world is a big place. I could, unless you're a very specialized engineer and you're in San Francisco and stuff, it might be a little bit hard to find you. But I've always believed if you create the right environment, you can always get people to join you from all over. And so we would just move on to finding the next candidate.
Yeah. And it reminds me of an idea, which is also a book, which is from Derek Sivers. Maybe you know it, which is hell yes or no. So if it's not a hell yes, it's no. So because you also have many other opportunity, and you have to be 100% sure if you are going to invest this time of your life, and if not, better find something else.
And you can
Absolutely.
apply that to your personal life, right? There are tasks that we have to do, like mow the lawn or do the laundry or whatever. Those are not necessarily hell yes things.
Exactly.
But if we're talking outside of domestic logistics, am I spending my life on hell yes stuff?
Yeah.
Am I friends, people I'm like, hell yes, I got to spend time with Roberto? Or is it like, fuck. Oh, sorry, I can't say that. Oh, oops. I have to spend time with Roberto, right?
Yeah.
If that's the case, spend your time on something else.
Yeah. And that's brilliant, because remind me of another thing, which is sometimes you said yes to a lot of things because it's in the future.
Mm.
And I have a trick that if this was tomorrow, would I say yes, or would I say, oh, because then sometimes you say, oh, yes, yes, I'm going to do that. Yes, of course. And then when the time comes, like, oh, and by the way, this was the feeling that when we had wanted to do this live, this was, for me at least, was an instant hell yes. And I was same excited today as I was 2 months ago. What was that when we were discussing?
We certainly know how to have a lot of fun. It's 4:30.
Yeah,
Do we need to do something different? Wrap up or?
I think perhaps one thing, Peter, if someone wants to connect with you or know more about your work and what you're doing, what's the best way to get in touch?
Well, take note of my name. It's quite unusual, so I'm easy to find online. Obviously, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I have a website, petersorgenfrei.com. They can ask you. and vice versa. If anybody who's on here listening to this who knows me and wants to learn more about Roberto's amazing work, which we actually haven't talked about today, your plethora of you've read, you're the most well read. I have a fair amount of books, but I suspect you have more. I'd be happy to facilitate introductions to Roberto and the stuff that he does.
Thank you, Peter. It has been so much fun. I learned a lot of things, and I have many more questions about the hiring and all the things.
We'll do an episode 2. We'll do a part 2 at some point.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you again, Peter, and also thank you to all the people who connected and who interacted with us and asking amazing questions. You help us to have a better conversation, and we hope it has been useful to you. At least for me, it has been.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Roberto.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.